countries. And we have about 230 companies in our business council. And we also have a student council, so we say that we have three concentrations of competence in IVA. We have the academic competence, we have the industrial competence, and we have the future perspectives from our student council. We like to think of the society built by technology in the societies or humankind's service. We are not doing only technology for technology's sake, but we want it to be useful for the endeavors of humankind. And our areas are technical and economical sciences, and also really completely important part is the development of our industries. So we are trying really to build bridges between the different sectors in society based on our competencies in our different parts of the academy. So what we are at the moment focusing on is the competitiveness, of course, of the industry and business, where competence development and education are very important parts. We have always been working also innovation and entrepreneurship issues, and we are doing a very big initiative at the moment with that. Energy is something that we have worked with for 100 years, and as you know, now energy issues are also very, very important for the development of the society because of the war. And we are working very much with that, with our different organs, together with industries, together with academics, together with the public sector, trying to make sure that we make decisions which are evidence-based. Resource effectiveness is important. You have read in the newspapers that now we have to start saving again and making our resources in the way which is sustainable. And finally, digitalization is one of those really key issues that we have been working with for a very long time. And that's kind of a little bit touching on what we are going to be doing here today. We have had these breakfast seminars by our industrial council for a very long time, and it's a very good way of having a dialogue between people who are leading the development in Swedish companies and you who are here today, both online and in person. So I'm giving the word to the moderator of today, Erik Ekudden from Ericsson, and who has been very active in our business council. So Erik, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tula. And well, good morning, all of you. Hope you're enjoying breakfast. I think it's great, as Tula said, to be able to meet physically. Be back in these really important networking environments. And this will be a discussion, but there will also be an opportunity, of course, in some time for you to ask some questions. Questions not for me, I think, but for our guest. And today's guest, as you all know, want to welcome you up here. Allison is Allison Kirkby, CEO, head of all of Telia, and it's great to have you here on behalf of Näringslivsrådet. We are super proud to be able to have this breakfast discussion with you.
Well, so it's great to be invited back again.
Yeah,
Thank
very
you.
welcome. So, big applause. And you said back now, Allison.
I did, yes.
So 4.5 years ago, you were visiting IVA.
Yeah.
It feels like a very long time ago, given the pandemic and everything that has changed since then. But do you remember the questions you got? Any particular questions?
Yes. So it was 4.5 years ago. I was the CEO of another telco at the time here in Stockholm. Unknown to me, there was a deal team in the room that was supporting Telia. And I was asked the question, do you believe telcos should own content? And I was very honest with my view and my answer. And at the time I said, no, I didn't believe telcos should own content. So as I was thinking about preparing for today, I kind of thought, you know, of Forrest Gump's quote, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And, you know, 2 years later, I joined Telia, and I had a content business, so which I still have today.
Absolutely, I think, yeah. Well, you didn't.
And football.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, you,
yes.
you didn't know that.
I didn't know that. Life is full of surprises. And the other thing I learned from that day is be careful what you say, because you never know who's in the room.
Yeah,
so.
that's a good advice.
Yes.
But I think you all know, Allison, you have now a long history in tech and media, more than 10 years, and before that in consumer goods.
Yes.
And I think that in itself is actually an interesting background, knowing where our industry is going,
Yes.
the networking industry, the telecom industry, the digital industry. So I think this is going to be a great discussion. Since then, and certainly since these the 4.5 years since you were here last, the business landscape has changed quite a lot.
Yep.
I would say that if we think a little bit about our own industry, 5G wasn't around then. It's now this fantastic innovation platform. The mobile industry is rapidly growing, and actually by the end of this year we will have more than 1 billion 5G subscriptions around the world. So it's sort of at pace, really happening very, very fast. And we have some 230 operators that have already launched 5G services. Users get hundreds of megabits per second for the smartphones or tablets or laptops. Enterprises can start to count on this kind of networking capability, something which they haven't been able to do while being mobile before, because now you get certainty in terms of service, you get better performance, latency, reliability, and so forth. Almost like if you're using fixed services. But still, with all these good things happening, it's not all well in the industry. I think we have to admit that. And I'm not only thinking about the macro environment and the war and all the inflationary pressure and all the things that are around that. But from an industry, from a telco perspective, what would you say are some of the challenges, or perhaps the biggest challenges that we are now facing in the telco industry?
Yeah, I think, well, there's probably 3 challenges. I think the first one is the telco sector, despite us being unable to cope without being connected nowadays, has been one of the worst performing sectors for shareholders for the last 10, 15 years. And in this era where we're all investing in the next generation of networks, which will free up so much automation, digitalization, sustainable innovation to help the green transition, the industry is not yet recognized by owners as being reliable at delivering a return on that investment. And why is that? Well, the scale of the investment that needs to go into our networks is significant. We've also been a deflationary industry. You know, that generally the pricing of our services has come down consistently over the last 10 years. It might not always feel like it, but you are consuming ever more data every day. And regulation has not necessarily been helpful. And I'm sure we'll get on to some of that later. Regulation absolutely was right to encourage competition, and it has enabled innovation. And I think, you know, the truth is, having come into the industry late, I think the industry sat on its laurels for too long and held on to the revenue from fixed telephony, even though it was dying, and didn't see the value of data. And I think now, as everybody sees just how important data is to how societies operate and how business models operate, we're going to have to find new ways of monetizing the services, which we will talk about, I'm sure, a bit when we talk about some of the industrial stuff. So it's been a challenging industry. We've also, you know, one of the bits of regulation, and as I always compare this to consumer goods industry as well, we've enabled all of these amazing tech businesses to be created because they operate on our networks. 55% of our traffic is generated by Google, by YouTube, by the hyperscalers, but they don't pay us a penny. And you know, as the traffic increases, that consumes more energy. It consumes more cost for us, and so something is broken in the relationship between regulation and how we can get a fair return on investment, considering how critical we are. So that's some of the biggest challenges. And then the third bit I'd like to say is the public markets are very, very short-term focused, and our investments are very long-term in nature. And you know, between being at Tele2, I went to TDC in Denmark just after the Macquarie Infrastructure Fund took it private with the Danish pension funds. And their thesis and view was that fiber and connectivity infrastructure is such a long-term investment. It should be treated the same as energy investment. And that's their thesis behind the separation, because actually the telco is two different business models. It's the infrastructure, but then it's the retail service layer as well. And I think that's one of the challenges we have in the public markets, because I can sell some towers for 27 times my EBITDA to a Swedish pension fund, but the Swedish pension fund won't pay 7 times EBITDA to buy a Telia share.
No.
So there's something irrational there.
That's very well, exactly, and it has come now to Europe. It's been very much ongoing, selling assets, selling towers in North America for a while. I think that's in itself something to really discuss and be perhaps even concerned about, how these changes affect ultimately long-term competitiveness of the industry. But I think it's clear what you're saying. That is happening, and the shareholders say they have different metrics clearly evaluating these different assets.
It's a challenge, but it's an opportunity for the incumbents again, because the incumbents, and you know, Telia has the biggest footprint of digital infrastructure across the region, the Nordics and the Baltics. And that is a phenomenal asset when you think about the digitalization of society and how digital tools will enable a more sustainable society and more sustainable industries over the long term as well.
We should get back to that one as well. Still a little bit more on the regulatory side, or on the environment that we're living in. I do recognize, of course, everything that you're saying, but I also see that there is perhaps a lack of understanding of these investment cycles, that you need to build a platform before you can get the innovation on top. I think that's a discussion we're having with politicians all around the world, not the least, I would say, in Europe and here in Scandinavia, that this is about preparing for the future, preparing that footprint, whether it's fiber or 5G, just to make sure that you have it everywhere, because that's the only way to unleash all this innovation. And then you need to have a regulatory framework that promotes that rather than stifles it. And I think this is really something to take notice of in markets around the world where we see this being unleashed, where we see the growth on top. That is actually also supported by good regulation when it comes to returning cost of capital in the core business, in the digital infrastructure.
Yes. And there is a good dialogue now, and certainly the dialogue is enabled by the fact that the current regulatory system that allows the hyperscalers to take advantage of net neutrality mean that doesn't incentivize the hyperscalers to think about the energy consumption in our networks, and that is triggering a new dialogue.
Very much needed, very much needed. But maybe a little bit more on the hyperscalers. And if we are honest about it, this fantastic network that you already had, the 4G network, the kind of innovation platform of the last 10 years, that really created a lot of things. An app economy, smartphones with everything that we enjoy as consumers and perhaps employees, enterprise as well. It's very much fueling innovation on the cloud side, on the cloud infrastructure side, the storage part, the compute part, everything that we enjoy from that part of the ecosystem. But it has downplayed quite a lot the networking part. Of course, it's been there. 4G LTE has been the backbone of that. But of course, it hasn't been monetized in that way. So how do you look at this? Many have benefited from early investments. And you already touched a little bit on it, but hyperscalers, and I would say some call them tech giants or consumer electronics companies that have been enjoying this ride. Do we see them, or do you see them as friends, or perhaps not so friendly, foes?
We see them as strategic partners. And clearly, without the hyperscalers, we probably wouldn't have properly monetized 4G, because they created the services that drove, and the devices that drove consumers and households to need to access great networks. So they encouraged, they generated trial, as we would say in the consumer goods industry of the past, and we were able to monetize that. We are also a very important distribution channel to the hyperscalers. We sell their devices, and those devices encourage more consumption or more loyalty to us. We also partner with them now in selling, cloud services. And so I really, we increasingly work in a very complex ecosystem. And, as I go back to the, if you think of the telco as the infrastructure layer and then the retail layer, for us to be the most purpose-driven digital telco on the planet, which is what we want from Telia, we need to create this platform that allows our partners to plug all of their services into our platform, and then we sell that on to our customers. So we're not just giving them connectivity, we're giving them smart metering, or we're giving them cloud-based services, or we're giving them security services. And that platform should be easy for us to plug and play those services, and for our customers to get the right user experience. So I think, sometimes they're a friend, sometimes they're a foe, but like yourselves at Ericsson, they are a fundamental strategic partner for our business model, and we need to work with them so that it's good for our customers and the societies we serve, and ultimately then deliver the right return to our shareholders. But we've got to be careful that they don't get too big. They already are, but there is... But there is competition. There is 3 major cloud-based services now. And with the tension on cybersecurity, national sovereignty, there will have to be national autonomy implications to those cloud-based services. So, but you've got to watch them, and the regulator should be watching that now more than some of the services that we provide.
So on that co-opetition or really working as partners, because you're offering a platform, and platforms need, of course, tenants, and you need this give and take in terms of who does what. Is that well enough understood, how the industry has changed to be more of a platform industry, and therefore needing to work with hyperscalers, needing to work with enterprise application providers? Is that...
I think it's becoming clear, clearly in a world of convergence, the consumer and the household is increasingly used to buying their mobile, their broadband, their television services from one provider. And as we work with property developers, we are selling them smart metering to put into the apartments, and, in-building Wi-Fi to make the apartment buildings a nicer experience for the owners. And then as you look at what we're doing in the enterprise space, it's not just connectivity we're selling security services. We're creating 5G private networks for the mining industry or the paper industry. That convergence is increasingly becoming like a platform to help the individual, the household, or the enterprise live their digital lives in a smarter way. But could we do a better job of communicating it? Yes. I think it's one of the reasons that I was hired into the telco industry was because the forward-leaning CFO that hired me also came from consumer goods. He came from PepsiCo, and he felt the telco sector was too full of, engineers and accountants, and they didn't necessarily know how to commercialize and monetize and communicate with their customers in a way that you could build deep, long-lasting relationships. And so that's why I was, lucky to join the telco industry, and I love it. But there's a much better job that we can do at Telia as well as communicating the great things we do, because too much of it is focused on the latest promotion for your SIM card.
It's quite easy, straightforward to continue to sell that great product or service or offering that you've had there for some time with some incremental enhancements. Because, of course, these consumers, they have already had 10 years of education on what it means to be digital in in everyone's life. So they are already on board. The issue, as you point out, is that many enterprises, large or small, medium enterprises, they are actually still in the very early phase of their digitalization. Of course, they try to digitalize their backend, but once you realize that processes are mobile and you need to sort of connect to the outside, then there's another change there, and they may not be as ready to adopt or accept these changes either. So there is one side on the platform, what can be offered, and the other side I think is on the taker side. How can these enterprises and the public sector be more ready to consume these platform services that you're offering? Because that's a big change.
It is, and our sales organization and our innovation teams need to be able to explain and educate the public sector and some of these industries what our tools can do to help them innovate and digitalize faster. I also, for the pleasure, sit on the board of British Telecom, which is another incumbent. And, you know, if you look at, I know you've just said the public sector needs to digitalize and enterprise needs to digitalize. Sweden and the Nordics is way ahead of the UK in terms of the engagement from enterprises to think about digital tools to modernize. And it's the same. I met with the CEO of Orange last week. Their enterprise businesses are in free fall at the moment because they've not yet got an enterprise space that is thinking about the future. And I think, you know, we are definitely as a region further ahead. And thanks to the likes of yourselves and Nokia and, you know, telcos like ourselves, I think there's a fantastic opportunity for us to enable the digitalization of the public sector and many enterprises, large and small, in the coming years. And that's always been the hope for 5G, that 5G would be less of an obvious added benefit for the consumer apart from higher speeds and faster response times if you're a gamer, but it would create new industrial use cases for connectivity, which is what we are seeing.
Maybe not dwelling too much more on it, but isn't it a little bit striking that having this digital maturity in Sweden or in Scandinavia, and still we are not yet fully leveraging that platform for innovation, for sectorial or cross-sectorial collaboration with new capabilities in the platform used to create competitiveness in the Swedish industries or the public sector. It ought to be not just a proving ground, it ought to be, I think, world leadership in terms of actually using it in the best way, and then, of course, create competitiveness for every other industry. It's a little bit striking that we haven't come further.
It is, and one of the reasons was 5G was late to come to Sweden because we were one of the latest in the world to be able to go through the spectrum auction, and that was for geopolitical reasons, which I'm sure you're going to get onto at some point.
Yeah, we have to get onto that one as well. I'm sure there will be questions on it otherwise, but you touched upon one thing which may be good to hear your view on in a little bit more detail. There has been some discussions about who is paying for the investments in the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure. Concepts like fair share or being part of footing the bill for the investments, the long-term investments by users of the network. What's your take on that? Should the main users, you mentioned the traffic numbers, more than 50% coming from a select few applications. What's your view on that?
I think, you know, as I said earlier, the model is today broken. You know, it's not sustainable for traffic to be growing at the rate of 30% a year. And those that are really monetizing the traffic don't have to pay to contribute to anything that they put on that network. You know, as I said, I compare it to the consumer goods industry. If you want to launch a new shampoo, you need the retailers as your distributors, and so you pay them to get it in the supermarkets, and that's a key way of getting your shampoo to the end consumer. Because of net neutrality and the internet having to be free for all, that was not possible to charge the hyperscalers. But the fair share model is looking at how they take a fair share in the investment going forward for the networks, and therefore be incentivized to think about efficiency and productivity measures when it comes to energy consumption. So, but let's see, I hope it doesn't become like another tax. You know, my personal view is it would be better to reassess the net neutrality rules rather than fair share, but that has got no traction. So I support some intervention. Whether fair share is the right answer or not, time will tell.
Because I don't know, some may actually be a lot into what you just said about the different mechanisms for this, but there is also, just recalling from the past, we've had peering agreements between players in terms of sharing costs for passing traffic back and forth. There are other mechanisms to make sure that those that benefit actually are part of paying it. So it seems to be a healthy discussion and a needed discussion.
Yes.
But to your point, if you go in with hard and heavy regulation and taxes, then of course the flip side of that and the risk of that is that you stifle innovation.
Exactly.
You end up in a corner where you absolutely don't want to be. So I think this is maybe an area where Scandinavia, Sweden could have a more sort of forward-leaning, proactive, innovation-friendly way of dealing with this.
And I think the regulators need to stop beating us up for the pricing of our services, because they have been so deflationary.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, we've got to ensure that we can better communicate the value for money of our services.
Yeah, I think this is clearly a topic that will be with us for another year or so, because obviously now everyone realizing society, enterprises need the platform. You need to find a way to finance what will be even higher performance digital infrastructure. It's not enough with best effort any longer. When you start to segment and differentiate offering, of course, there needs to be reasonable mechanism to recover that investment. That's absolutely clear.
And, when we work in an ecosystem of partners like we do when we go in and create private networks for industries, whether it be Boliden or a hospital, we as Ericsson and Telia need to work out how do we sell the value for money opportunity of this service to the industry or the customer, and then turn it into revenue streams that are profitable over the long term. And that's something the telco sector has never really thought about in advance. How do you properly monetize these services? And we're going to have to do that as a partnership, because there'll be some private networks that Ericsson will take the lead, and then there'll be some private networks where Telia will take the lead. And we need to make sure that Ericsson doesn't become a foe in this new ecosystem going forward as well.
Ah, that's an interesting angle.
Yes.
What happened there?
It's best if we grow together.
Yeah, we have to grow together. But just for the record here, then, we have absolutely no such intentions, Allison, to become a foe. I think that what the industry, on that note, has realized, and of course we are very much part of that industry, although the vendor part of the industry, is that the shift into enterprises consuming 5G or mobile services is as big as the shift from fixed to mobile back in the early 90s, meaning that you need to change behaviors, enterprise behaviors, not just consumer behaviors. You have to change business models. You have to change your technology, your platform, otherwise it's not fit for the new world. And what we are trying to do is really to promote solutions that help enterprises to adopt 5G.
Yes.
And that could be, for example, 5G private networks for enterprises, of course serving you and other operators in terms of having that gear, but also making sure that there is capabilities to reach small, medium businesses, such as with 5G CPEs that you put in your branch office or your home office. Those kind of solutions we think are very important to be able to really get 5G out to all the enterprises. And we do a few other things here in terms of helping these enterprises to use 5G. But point taken, Allison. I think this is going to be a lot about partnerships. How can we together help countries, help enterprises, help industries to digitalize?
Yeah. No, for those that don't know, Ericsson and Telia created 1G.
Yeah,
just over 50 years ago. And we were the first to launch 4G here in Sweden as well. And if you look at the next revolution is the revolution of manufacturing industries. And that is where there is a fantastic opportunity for partnerships like ours to create the digital, to enable the digitalization of these manufacturing industries that need to automate, that need to be more efficient, they need to use new tools to be smarter and gather more data and information to run their businesses in a better, smarter way. So I think that is a fantastic opportunity, but it is about, it's a changing business model, and we will, as I said earlier, need to change our capabilities, as I'm sure Ericsson are as well, to be able to be successful.
Yeah, I think these are so major changes that we shouldn't hope that it happens overnight, because that would be completely unrealistic. At the same time, the learning is really that, to your point about 1G, you need to be early and test things. You need to be there to try out new technology, new business models, and I think that's where we will find these great opportunities. And it's a long-term journey, 10, 15 years. We're going to have this wave with us for until we get to 60, or at least 5G advanced, Allison. You want more technology?
I'm sure you'll sell it to me.
Do we only sell technology? Is that what we do?
No, you don't.
No, but I think it's actually a great segue into the next topic, which is not so easy. It's kind of on the geopolitical side, but it's also recognizing that from 1G until 5G, we served consumers. We also actually have had a faster innovation than any other industry than I know of. We have had, in just 30 years, and this is worth reflecting on, in just 30 years we've actually improved the performance of the offerings, your offerings to the market and the technology's capability by 1 million times. 100 times improvement every 10 years for 30 years. Not even Moore's law, not even the cloud industry is keeping up with that kind of innovation speed. But that's, of course, why we are able to serve consumers with low, perhaps too low prices, but we are able to get this as a global interoperable technology, thanks to global standards and all the hard work in R&D and building networks and operating networks. Now we have a different geopolitical situation. Tensions are super high already, and there's no sign that will go down. If we just look at the capabilities, roaming, backward compatibility, interoperability, and the innovation system that can actually be sustained over 30 years to create this fantastic platform, how do you see that in terms of the geopolitical situation now? How is that impacting the telecom sector from your point of view?
I think for good and bad. Clearly, it already started to hit us in 2018 when, the Five Eyes, NATO were increasingly concerned about, Chinese equipment in our networks, particularly in an era of 5G, when you would have critical services run over these networks, and how that, Chinese equipment might enable nation-state interference. And so it started then. We thought we had 4 vendors that we could go and negotiate our 4G modernization and 5G upgrades with, and we ended up it was 2. Luckily, both Ericsson and Nokia are here in the region and took advantage of to really work in partnership with Telia in particular, and I'm sure many operators, to make that transition as quickly as possible. So that was the start. Clearly then COVID made it just accelerated the move of information to be in the cloud, in people's homes, in people's businesses. So made governments and enterprises even more aware of the need for security of that information. And now the war has just, made that tension even more obvious. And, the good thing is, governments and regulators now recognize that, telecoms is critical national infrastructure that needs to be taken care of, that needs to be invested in, needs to have the right owners and the right equipment within it, and it shouldn't just be about cutting costs to pass on to the consumer. So that is the good news. But it does make it more complex, and it puts more responsibilities on us, particularly the incumbent telcos, who tend to have more specialist services for the emergency services or the security services. And so, you know, we are clearly actively working with Sweden and Finland at the moment on preparation for NATO, for joining NATO, and the need for us to have ever more secure systems and protect all of our customers, large and small, from cybersecurity is actually a fantastic opportunity for us, because suddenly people are seeing the value of data if it's used in the wrong way. And people and customers are increasingly coming to us because we have had the most trusted, secure networks over, you know, generations. They're coming to us for that added security around. So it's a positive, but then again, we've got to move quickly. And that's what we're very much working on at this point in time. But the bigger threat, I think, though, is it makes, you know, as we deglobalize at the moment, there's a real risk that we become even more inward looking. So, for example, there is a lot of conversation with government agencies at the moment that they don't want their data stored in the cloud if it's operated by one of the hyperscalers. You know, the hyperscalers, you know, create very secure clouds. They've got the innovation, the investment, the R&D. It can be encrypted. They can give you a key that it's only you that can unencrypt it. And if, you know, if governments think that Europe can create its own cloud-based services with national sovereignty, national autonomy in every country, that will slow down innovation, and we just don't have the capability to succeed. So I think deglobalization is dangerous from that point of view, and we have to educate. We need to work with the hyperscalers, and we all as an industry need to work with them and governments to help them ensure that we are giving safe and secure cloud-based services, or we will fall behind Asia and America again. And then you spoke about global standards and how that really enabled, you know, consistency around the world for 3G and 4G and 5G. There's a real danger that we won't have global standards for 6G if this continues. And that's not good for the industry. It's not good for innovation. So,
for sure, that's a real risk.
But I think for us, I view this whole security area as an area where we can once again reinforce that we are the most trusted provider of digital services.
And on the note of innovation and the opportunity with digitalization, I think you've touched upon it many times already, but how do you see it from a Telia perspective? What are the opportunities there?
It's really what 5G will enable, and it's 5G combined with the Internet of Things. In particular. So if I look at what we're doing in the mining industry, where we have, you know, a private network for Sandvik, also with Boliden, where we have vehicles operating without humans, so it's much safer. Those vehicles become a big monitoring device that sends back all sorts of information to the control room on the quality of the soil, on the quality of the air. And so, you know, that is a big area. We have 10 live private networks running across the region at the moment. We're the only one providing private networks in Finland. So the biggest gold mine in the world has a Telia 5G network. We're doing a lot with the forestry industry, the paper industry, with yourselves. We have Boliden. We're doing a lot of work with Volvo on autonomous vehicles, smart public transportation. Ourselves and Ericsson did a lot of work with crowd insights and data insights during the COVID era, working with Sahlgrenska Hospital to actually predict when the area would have certain case rates of COVID, so that the hospital could prepare for that from a staffing point of view. So there's lots of innovation opportunities. In fact, more than we can probably cope with at any point in time.
But you're also, I know, and some of it we support you with, but you're also very active in promoting the use of this innovation platform for all industries, especially in Scandinavia here or in Sweden.
Yes.
Any thoughts on how that is going, or could we do more, or how should we look at the Swedish innovation system? How good is it?
I think if you look at what's going on in the sustainability area here, if you look at H2 Green Steel, if you look at what Polarium are doing with their batteries to smart battery innovation, if you look at what is going to be happening in the energy industry, I think there is many opportunities for Ericsson and Telia to be at the heart of some of that digitalization of some of those industries. And I think we need to take advantage of it and ensure that we've got the capabilities to be able to support them so that they don't go and look elsewhere.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to support. I think this is an opportunity. We see it around the world that is starting to happen, and I think it would be a clearly missed opportunity if we can't capitalize on the green digital transition and actually have a leadership here in Scandinavia or in Sweden. Absolutely.
So as I mentioned earlier, one of the thesis behind the Macquarie take private of TDC is they fundamentally believe that over the long run, the digital infrastructure would need to converge with energy infrastructure because energy would need more access to digitalization. And the grids of fiber and the electricity grid should be very similar in nature. And as I look at some of the dialogues that we're having with the energy sector here, we'll be announcing a big deal in the next couple of weeks that my team are on the line. I'm not allowed to mention at the moment. We feel that we will be enabler for some of the work that's going on in the grid here in Sweden.
Yeah, I hope there are some thoughts or maybe questions around that, because this transition on energy systems and doing it in a smart way, it's got to be a great opportunity for the digital assets that you have. Actually.
Yeah, so we've got some trials going on with Polarium at the moment, where our base stations for our connectivity need batteries in case, but in case we lose frequency. But now what we're using those batteries to conserve when the energy is cheap and consume from it when it's expensive. And what we're looking at is actually when there's excess in those batteries, could we contribute back to the grid when frequency is not reliable or there's blackouts? So that's something that we can also contribute back into the energy grid, and that's innovation.
That's super important innovation, and it's actually a bigger opportunity than you might think of it. A few batteries in base stations, but you have pretty massive sort of additional, at least instantaneous capacity that can be used.
Yes, and a true circularity as well.
It's really fascinating to see that. Okay, it has been fascinating to discuss with you, Allison, but I'm sure that others have more questions, thoughts. Otherwise, I have plenty more. Yes. Well, we have to have a mic for you because we have friends, colleagues online here that needs to hear you. So,
thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. My name is Björn Linderstena. Two questions. First is to Allison, and that is related to your fantastic chocolate box. Would you please open that and share with us some ideas of what type of chocolates you see for the next 5 years, or imagine, would this content be much bigger proportion of your chocolate box in 5 years, do you think? And related to that, you were talking about the Internet of Things. How much should we think? I mean, we understand the infrastructure you're building for that, and that is massive. Would you see that you will also get in more into the software-related tasks for the commercial and the consumer businesses? That is my first question.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
The second, can we let Allison try to answer that first?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, the chocolate box. I see content as it increasingly goes to streamers, that we should be the aggregator of all of that content. So you should be able to have a platform to access all of the content you want. Just, I want to be the enabler of all the digital experiences an individual, a household, or an enterprise might need. In the home, it's a range of channels to watch TV, or it might be some smart metering, or in the enterprise, it's a range of security services or cloud-based services. So yes, you can say, well, why can't I get Viaplay or Premier League at the moment? That's because the distributors are still the content owners are still thinking that they can go direct to the consumer, but actually what Netflix and others are realizing, they need the distributors to go direct to the consumer, because consumers want to consume all sorts of content, and we can give them a platform where they can pick and choose. They can have a pick and mix of chocolates at any point in time and not necessarily be locked into all of the subscriptions that you want to have at all times. So I see ourselves, we have to become the best aggregator of content and not necessarily own all of the content, and just be a great then partner to Netflix, to the TV4s, to the Seymours, to the Viaplays. And that's hopefully where we'll go with content. On your IoT question, you know, it is, will we get into software services? We will not create software services ourselves. Software will enable our various platforms to operate in the best possible way for our customers to be able to pick and choose whatever services they want. And certainly software is fundamentally required for us to deliver some of the services that we take to the enterprise space as well. But, you know, when I look at our property tech division, you know, they're working with property developers to see what are all the range of services you need in the building, you know, in-home Wi-Fi, remote locking, you know, smart metering for energy consumption. That all requires APIs to be able to connect those offers and services to the platform that we give. Does that answer your question? Yes.
Thank you. My second question would...
Maybe a little bit shorter.
Very short. Standardization, China versus West. 2 years ago, a bomb was dropped somehow that they wanted to change. What does it mean? Where are we today? And what do you see the consequences from this?
Eric probably sees more than me because they're probably already thinking about 6G and beyond. But today, we are operating to the same standards. I think if this tension continues between the US and China, China will go their own way. And then you will have a fragmented world. Maybe not 6G, but definitely 7G, unless we can somehow keep the Chinese close. But you know, the Chinese telecoms operators, they're not suffering as a result of, sorry, the vendors, they're not suffering as a result of the decisions that the US and the West have taken, because they've still got massive scale in China, in Southeast Asia, in South America. So it's a big challenge that I think as an industry we've got to avoid happening. But the way things are evolving between the US and China, unless there's a different stance taken by US, I think it's a massive threat. So it won't be the same to Rome when you go to China. It will be like the old days when you got to America and it was GSMA, you know, GSM.
Exactly. You mentioned 1G, and we've had certainly periods with multiple standards, so the industry can handle that. I mean, we know how to do that. But of course, there's a price. There's a cost for everyone, and prices will go up, and perhaps innovation also will be suffering.
But you know, you know, love them or hate them, the Chinese have a very, very long-term vision, and they're getting on with that. And there's a real, you know, we discussed it, Tula and I, earlier, there's a real threat to the Western world at the moment at how short-term governments, investors are when you're up against, when they have, you know, 100 years visions. And that's something we need to think about as you know, as democracy.
Thank you so much for the question and your answer, Allison. More tricky question for Allison. Yes. You have the microphone here.
Hello, my name is Susie Kvart, and I have worked with corporate governance all my work life, almost. I have a question, which is more broader maybe than the previous one. You as coming from another business environment than the Swedish or the Nordic system, I wonder, we in Sweden or in the Nordic countries, we claim that we have a superior corporate governance model, the Nordic model, where we have a clear divide between owners, board, and the executive group. and that has, well, resulted in that we, at least in Sweden, have more in multinationals and unicorns per capita than any other country. Can you see this difference, or that we have this advantage in Sweden compared to your well, UK experience?
I think there are advantages and disadvantages. I think the standards on corporate governance in the UK is way higher than in the UK, than here in Sweden. But some of that has gone too far. And it means that boards spend a lot of time on compliance matters and maybe not necessarily enough time on the value creation aspects. And actually, if you look at the performance of the FTSE 100 relative to other indices, it's been a very poorly performing index. And increasingly, they're saying it is about the corporate governance. You know, a BT board and committee session takes up 2 days of my life every 6 to 8 weeks. Now, it's good that I'm in a similar industry, so I can take back to my industry, but it's all encompassing. So I think the balance is better here. I do, however, wonder whether the Swedish corporate governance way is really always able to get the best board members for companies. And particularly nowadays, when you're competing with the private equity world and the venture capital world, you know, then some people would rather go and have some skin in the game and get a bit of an upside. I think that's a real tension now for the quality of the board members you can get, because, you know, a company like Telia needs international people on the board to help challenge me and my management team to be the best we possibly can be. And that's very difficult if you're fishing from a very limited pool. And so I think there has to be some thoughts on that going forward. And also, as the CEO, I kind of in the UK world, the CEO and CFO is generally a part of the board as well. And I think that the challenge is still there, but it does mean there is more alignment between the executives and the board. They feel as though they're on the journey together to create value for owners and society with the right distance. And I think the board being very separate from the executives, and then the board not always having the right set of capabilities. So in the UK, I think it's just a different model, and you're able to attract a broader set of people on the board. So that's my feedback, good and bad.
Thank you. Yes, there is another question here.
Hello, I'm Christopher Anderson. Thanks for a great seminar, and 100% agree with the last answer you gave. I really like what you said about being purpose-driven and having that as part of the core on how you drive the company, and some of the examples of driving more cleaner energy. Can you say anything more again about what you're doing towards the UN sustainability goals and energy efficiency, for instance, equality?
Yep, so we have environment, digital inclusion, and ethics at the core of our ESG goals. Sustainability is fully integrated into our strategy. I was lucky to inherit. My predecessor had really pushed for having daring goals alongside financial goals. And so, you know, we are using 100% renewable energy in our own operations already, as you would expect, but across all of our footprint. We are very progressive when it comes to moving towards the net zero targets across our whole supply chain. So we have a very ambitious set of targets there. We do a lot on digital inclusion. So we have programs, we call it Mer Digital, for helping the elderly learn and access digital tools, and Bli Digital for the smaller end of the SME sector. So in the last 2 years, we've enabled, just over 826,000 individuals to build new digital skills. And then clearly we're doing a lot in our own operations as well. We were one of the first telcos to support eco-rating of devices. So that consumers can now choose their handsets based on the eco-rating quality of it. And we use all of our suppliers are vetted for their own commitment to the SDG as well. So a number of activities. We just won the Platinum Award with EcoVadis as well. So I'd say we do a lot there, much more to do, much more that we can do. But it's really important for us to attract talent nowadays. And, you know, our purpose is to reinvent better connected living. And that is, you know, making connections better for all, no matter whether you're an individual, a household, or an enterprise, and having a better impact on society. So there's lots I could take you through, but we're very proud of what we do, but much more to do.
Thank you, Christopher, and of course, Allison, for the answer. And it was a good, I think, and fitting end to this discussion and this breakfast, Allison, and on a high when it comes to the opportunities in transition to green and sustainable. And of course, Telia is very much at the forefront, pioneer there.
As is Ericsson.
I would like to thank you so much, Allison, for this. And as a token of our, small token of our appreciation, also on behalf of IVAs Näringslivsråd, Teknik i samhällets tjänst. It's Swedish. I'm sure you can read it. But
I will try. Thank you.
So, Allison,
thank you very
so
much.
Thank you.
Thank you
So much.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you who took the time to come to IVA here. Hopefully you enjoyed a little bit of networking before we started and maybe also afterwards here. We need that. I know that from my personal or business life as well. Coming together, coming back in the office has been so important over the last 6 months. So great to see you all here, and thanks a lot.